Good afternoon, folks. My name is Dan Bruce, the town moderator. Welcome to the Walpole 2020 Fall Annual Town Meeting. There being a quorum over 76 members present. There's actually 114 just before 1. Please come to order. Liz, we have all sworn in now?
I'm looking for Julian Morley and Susan
Jillian Morley and Susan
Naughton.
Naughton, please stand if you're here. Okay, sorry, remain standing. You need to be sworn in. That's Jillian. I do not see Susan.
Do you, Julian Morley, solemnly swear that you will faithfully and impartially discharge the duties incumbent upon you as a representative town meeting member in Precinct 1 according to the bylaws of the town of Walpole and the laws of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts?
Oh, Susan Naughton, I'm sorry. My bad. I don't have my good glasses on. Go ahead.
Do you, Susan Naughton, solemnly swear that you will faithfully and impartially discharge the duties incumbent upon you as a representative town meeting member in Precinct 3 according to the bylaws of the town of Walpole, in Precinct 4 according to the bylaws of the town of Walpole and the laws of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts? Thank you.
Folks, just stepping back for a sec, Walpole Media TV is providing live coverage of today's town meeting on Comcast Channel 22 and Verizon Channel 30. Live streaming of this meeting is also available on YouTube by going to the Walpole Media channel. And as always, for your reviewing pleasure, you can watch a replay of this meeting anytime by going to the website walpolemedia.tv and clicking the on-demand button. We're going to be hearing that wind a lot, I think. Does the clerk attest to the return of the warrant?
I do.
Yes, she does. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Folks, as you all know, we normally have several ceremonies that are part of our meetings. However, as I've previously stated in the protocol that was sent to you all, our goal today is just to balance discussion and debate on the articles while limiting the length of the meeting. I don't want to limit debate, I want to limit the length of the meeting. So without further ado, I'm not going to get into the whys. You all know why. So to my left, we have Town Council Attorney Lauren Goldberg, Town Administrator Jim Johnson, and Chairman of the Select Board Ben Barrett. To my right, we have Mark Riddell, Chairman of the Finance Committee, and Danny Crowley, the Vice Chair. That town meeting doesn't happen without the effort of many, many people. Short and sweet, thanks to each and every one of you. You know who you are. Before I review the procedural rules for this meeting, I've asked the Director of Public Health, Melissa Ranieri, to provide some health and safety guidance.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Welcome and good afternoon. Prior to beginning today's meeting, which is very similar to our most recent spring town meeting, I would like to remind everyone the importance of maintaining both a healthy and safe environment throughout today's event. Given the fact that everyone is sitting 15 feet away from one another, we are not requiring individuals to wear a mask throughout the entire meeting. That being said, throughout today's meeting, masks should be worn anytime you cannot maintain 6 feet of separation from one another and while you are moving around the field. We ask that you adhere to this request and be courteous to those around you. As a reminder, restrooms are located upon entering the field next to the Snack Shack building. Please be mindful of those around you and adhere to the brown markings in front of the restrooms, which provide the required separation between individuals should a line form. Additional restrooms can be found at the Plimpton School. You will notice the doors on the left are propped open. That is the entrance you will use. Set breaks will not take place, so please feel free to go throughout today's meeting. If you decide that you would like to make a comment by utilizing one of the 4 microphones located towards the front of the stage, when it is time to do so, we ask that you walk towards the podium closest to your seat to avoid walking past other see there are ground markings leading up to the microphone. We are asking that no more than 3 individuals be in line at the microphone at a time. Once it's your turn to use the microphone, we ask that you do not touch the microphone. A town representative will be available to position the mic should it be needed, and microphones will be properly sanitized throughout in between speakers. I understand that there has been some concerns regarding Triple E and the possibility of this meeting running into dusk. Please know that in preparation for today's meeting, the Walpole Health Department has had close communication with our Norfolk County Mosquito Control, and it has been determined that the risk for mosquitoes in general is very low this time of year, and today's forecast will reach a high of only 56 degrees, so it is unlikely any mosquitoes will be out. If there is a stray mosquito, disease risk now is little to none. That being said, to be extra cautious, in the bag you are giving upon entering the track, in addition to sunscreen, hand sanitizer, and hand warmers, you will also find DEET mosquito repellent wipes. DEET-free repellent is also available should you prefer and can be found at the entrance of the track. As always, wearing long sleeve and pants is one of the best precautionary measures and one can take to protect themselves from mosquito exposure. Following today's meeting, I ask that you wait for our town moderator to dismiss the group in an orderly fashion to avoid overcrowding. I want to thank everyone for continuing to do their part to keep the residents of Walpole and our community safe and healthy. I hope that everyone enjoys the remainder of their weekend following today's meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ranieri. Appreciate those comments. Now on to the procedural rules. When you are recognized to speak, please identify yourself by name and precinct, even if I call your name. I may get some wrong too because I'm having it's a little more difficult to identify you than it is when we're indoors. And the distance involved here as well too. So I apologize in advance, again, Ms. Morley, for those oversights. Address your remarks to the moderator. If you are asking a question, the moderator will ask the appropriate official for a response. Unfortunately, there will be no electronic voting for this meeting for obvious reasons. Voice voting will be the primary method of voting. I noted other towns using green and red voting cards during their outdoor meetings earlier this year, so we've instituted that here. You all should have a green for yes and a red for no. When we take a voice vote, I ask you to hold up your green or your red card, depending on your vote. This will provide you all a visual and provide us a visual to go with the voice call too, and hopefully that will cut down on the number of standing votes we have to take today. Today we have 6 tellers to help on those standing votes. On my left, we have Nancy Gallivan and Harry Clow have volunteered to be the teller. In the center, Mr. John Lee and Ron Nardine, and to my right, Susan Lawson and Allie Hamilton. So if there is a standing vote, I will first count the tellers, show by vote by show of hands. They will then count the standing vote for the ayes and then the noes. The tellers shall coordinate their counts and then announce from the microphone. The town clerk and I will then independently tally all the votes to determine whether the quantum has been met. As a reminder, you all know, as I sent out in the packet, all motions to amend were due yesterday. As I stated in my public service announcement and documented in the meeting protocol, no others will be accepted during this meeting. That's not the procedural ones, it's the ones on the article, just to be clear on that, okay? I do not like doing this. I hope we don't have, this is the last time we have to use this protocol, but I'm really trying to avoid, handing out papers and transferring amongst multiple parties, as I'm sure you understand. I hope you've all had an opportunity to review the recorded presentations. I'd love some comments if you find them helpful. I do, and I'd like to see them continue even outside this. So they're available online, and hopefully that'll help us move the meeting along. I know it's a brisk day. I'd like to think it's better than the 110 degrees we had in the spring. I hope you all agree, as we are hardy New Englanders, but I know some of you probably would prefer to be in Florida at this time. But or maybe not, I don't know. It depends on their COVID numbers, right? It's an honor to serve as the town moderator. I assure you that this and all town meetings will be run as efficiently and as fairly as possible. As you know, I have no vote that would influence the outcome of any particular article. So what I'd just like to do right now is ask for a quick vote of the body, please say aye if you're in favor of the continuing with the protocols I've laid out, and nay, and raise your red card if you're opposed. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your green card. Thank you. All those opposed, please say no and raise your red card. It is a unanimous vote. Oh, excuse me, we had one nay vote. Please rise now and remain standing. I'm going to, one little piece I'm going to do is remember those who have passed away since that served as a town meeting member. I'm just going to read their names off, and then we'll have a moment of silence. And once it's done, I'll instruct the clerk to send a copy of the resolution to their families. Gasper Grillo, Gasper Grillo. Gerald Shepard, William H. Powers, Lawrence S. Parenti, Mary Ellen Vargas, Ann L. Manikis, Thomas Henry Jones. A moment of silence. Thank you. You may be seated. At this point in time, I have a preliminary motion and a second from the Finance Committee to waive the reading of the warrant. Questions or comments? There being none, the Finance Committee's motion requires a simple majority vote. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your green card. All those opposed? It is a vote. I have another properly seconded motion that all motions of the Finance Committee be the main motion. Questions or comments? There being none, this also requires a simple majority vote. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your green card. There we go. All those opposed, please say no and raise your red card. It is a unanimous vote. Thank you. We'll now proceed to Article 1, a general article that remains open throughout the meeting. In Article 1, it is moved that the town will hear and act on the report of any committee or choose any committee the town think proper and transact other business that may legally come before it. At this time, we do not have any reports, so we'll move on to the consent agenda. Our rules provide for the moderator to make use of a consent agenda, and it's comprised of articles which generate no apparent controversy and could be voted on properly as one unit without debate. I sent an email earlier this week with the article numbers listed. I believe it was also delivered to you all. If any member objects to the inclusion of an article in the consent agenda, that article will be removed and acted upon separately in the normal course of the warrant. So at this point in time, I'm going to review and I'll ask you to call out. Article 2, the supplemental budget for fiscal year 2020. The Finance Committee vote with no action, 14-0-0. Article 16, the school budget transfers. This is the annual transfers of the Medicaid, McKinney-Vento Act, receipts, and student parking fees. The Finance Committee vote was favorable action 13-0-0 to transfer $318,734, an amount which is equivalent to the receipts from free cash to the school budget. Article 17, the Assessor Certification Program. The Board of Assessors contract to hire for real estate evaluations of non-residential and personal property of utility companies. Finance Committee vote favorable action 11-0-1, $54,000 from overlay. Article 22, the Sewer and Water DEP Department of Environmental Protections grant. This is to participate in their asset management planning and grant program. The Finance Committee vote was a favorable action 13-0-0. It's $70,000 from water retained earnings. Article 24, street acceptances. It's self-explanatory. The Finance Committee vote was favorable action 12-0-0. Article 25, the South Street Solar Overlay. The lead petitioner informed the Finance Committee of their intent to withdraw. The Finance Committee vote refer back to petitioner 13-0-0. Articles 27, 28, and 29, I am withdrawing from the consent agenda. I originally put them on because in the Finance Committee hearing, the petitioner themselves asked to withdraw them from the warrant. That is not possible. So I mistakenly concluded that they could be on there. So I apologize for that oversight. They have been removed from the consent agenda by my call. So we will take them up as the normal course. So we have Articles 2, 16, 17, 22, 24, and 25. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your green card. All those opposed, please say no and raise your red card. It is a unanimous vote. Thank you. Article 3. This motion is pursuant to the police contract. It is regularly moved and seconded that the town vote to approve the monetary items in an agreement between the town of Walpole and the Massachusetts Coalition of Police, IUPA, AFL-CIO, Local 115, Walpole Police Union, for the period July 1st, 2020 to June 30, 2023, and to raise and appropriate from taxation the sum of $57,600 to defray the fiscal year 2021 cost of said agreement. This is a petition of the Select Board. Mr. Trudell, the Finance Committee vote.
Finance Committee voted favorable action 12-1-1.
Thank you, Mr. Trudell. Mr. Barrett, the Select Board vote.
The Select Board voted 5-0-0 favorable action.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett.
Police contract was 11-3-0.
Correction, the Finance Committee vote on the police contract was 11-3-0. Thank you, Mr. Trudell and Mr. Crowley. Any questions or comments with regard to Article 3, please come down to the microphones now.
John O'Leary, RTM Precinct 3. I have an issue with this article and the fact for fiscal year 23, we're essentially giving the police a 5% raise. While it says 3% for fiscal year for pay, they're also getting a 2% stipend for acknowledging, using tools, which is, I consider, part of their job anyway. So it works out to a 5% raise. And I feel that in these economic times, that is excessive. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Leary. Ms. Sullivan.
Chandler Sullivan, Precinct 2. I stand before you today and ask for your support on Article 3, specifically the EpiPen stipend piece. If it weren't for the Walpole EMTs, Fire Department, and Police Department's quick response on Tuesday, December 13th, 2016, my daughter would not be alive today. At the time, my daughter was 20 months old and had an anaphylactic reaction to sun butter on her first exposure. Thankfully, her daycare called 911 and Walpole EMTs were there within minutes. She already had hives, facial swelling, had thrown up, and was having difficulty breathing. She received her first EpiPen upon Walpole's EMT's arrival and needed another one at the hospital an hour or so later, along with other medications and several hours of monitoring. As a result of Piper's reaction, I learned that police officers weren't allowed to carry EpiPens. It didn't make sense. Police officers are almost always the first one to emergencies, and they could carry Narcan and AEDs, but not EpiPens. That needed to change. When it comes to anaphylactic reactions, every second counts. Ever since Piper's reaction, I've worked tirelessly to get EpiPens into police officers' hands. I've worked closely with John Rogers on a bill at the State House that would enable all police officers in the state to be able to carry them. Thanks to Chief Carmichael, Walpole now has the opportunity to lead the charge in getting EpiPens into into every officer's hands. During my research after Piper's reaction, I learned of a girl by the name of Amy Laguerre, who was from just outside Chicago. Unfortunately, her story doesn't have a happy ending like Piper's. She was at a friend's house for a sleepover a week before she was supposed to begin 8th grade and had an anaphylactic reaction to an unknown food. 911 were called and police officers were the first to arrive, but they didn't have the EpiPens with them. It was too late. She ended up going into cardiac arrest and passed away a few days later. I've been in contact with Annie's mom, Shelley, over the past couple of years as she has had success with getting EpiPens to her local police officers in her area as a result of Annie's tragedy. And she's been extremely helpful in my efforts to do the same thing here in Massachusetts and Walpole. Walpole's officers have continually taken on more responsibility and liability over the years without compensation, but they did through their commitment to public safety. It's time for them to be compensated for carrying these life-saving tools. The same goes for dispatchers. People run into the station quite often with medical emergency, and the dispatchers are the only personnel in the station. They are trained in emergency medical dispatch and are the first level of care in the continuum of care, and they keep people on the line to provide life-saving instructions. The stipend wouldn't exceed $57,000 for the year for the entire police force, which is well worth it in my opinion. Many of you may not be impacted by allergies and may not think this is needed. I, however, beg to differ. You would think differently if one of your loved ones was affected by allergies. Food allergies, airborne allergies, and insect sting reactions are all on the rise. One of you could be allergic to bee stings or a specific food and not even realize it until you were experiencing a severe reaction that required an EpiPen. Your body's constantly changing, and you can grow into allergies at any point in time. Allergies do not discriminate. In closing, I urge you to vote yes. Let's do everything we can as a community to keep our members and our guests as safe as possible and to avoid a tragedy like Annie's here in our town. Our officers have been carrying AED and Narcan for years, so it's time for them to start carrying EpiPens as another essential tool as a first responder to help save as many people as they can. It's a win-win for everyone, as you never know if or when you or a loved one may need one. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sullivan.
Can you hear me? Down. Good afternoon, Julie Larry, Precinct 5. Through you, Mr. Moderator, I just had a question for FinCom as to the dissenting votes on this. I could barely hear what they were from back there because your mic wasn't working.
The vote was 11-3-0. Mr. Trudell, the dissenting votes.
Yeah, the dissenting votes primarily were all tied to the stipend.
Mark, you need to
Hey,
talk into
can
your
you hear
microphone.
The dissenting votes were all tied to the fact of the third-year stipend. And basically that was it. They were looking at the extra pay increase, and that was the reason for the no votes.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to add that I stand here fully supportive of EpiPens being in the hands of our first responders without any doubt. But it's a separate issue with a stipend to support that argument. And I fully support our first responders, our police, fire, without a doubt, and I always have. I've been involved in many town committees in the past, and I hope they know how much I support them. My concern as a citizen and as an RTM is just the sustainability of having a stipend in for 3 years and what that looks like long term for the entire town and how it affects our daily lives from a tax standpoint. And again, that's just one perspective, and I get that. That's just something I wanted to mention. But I don't want it misconstrued or looked at as a lack of support for our police and fire. And I don't think it should be tied into this idea that if you don't do the stipends, there wouldn't be any EpiPens. And I say that respectfully, Chandler. I know how serious of a situation you were in a few years ago, but I just wanted to state that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lowry.
Hi, Deb Pedersen. Sorry, RTM Precinct 2. I would echo the person who spoke before me. I fully believe that having EpiPens, Narcan, and AEDs in the hands of police and first responders is really important. However, I'm also concerned about this stipend. It's a percentage of their pay, and with cost of living increases every year, this stipend increases yearly. Other ways to deal with this would be to take money from other areas of the police budget that may be overfunded, or perhaps a flat fee. This would allow the first year police officer who makes the least amount of money, but is probably responding to just as many calls as the person who has been there the longest, to gain the support the same way. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Peterson. Mr. Gallivan.
My name is Mark Gallivan, RTM Precinct 8, and Select Board member. I speak in favor of this contract. I think the Walpole Police are doing a great job. Not only the things that are in their contract, but they've been leaders. For example, we've talked about with AEDs, CPR, naloxone, and now the EpiPen. I think it's important to recognize that they have taken on more responsibility and more liability. And I understand that some people are worried about the whole issue of stipends versus is it in the base rate. I think that's part of every negotiation that happens with the union. The union has to decide how they want to get paid, whether it's part of the base rate or part of the stipend. And that's what was negotiated. It was fairly negotiated. And I fully support the police, the work that they're doing, especially in these COVID days where there's lots of family stresses out in the community, there's lots of mental health issues, and they need to be available at a moment's notice to deal with the opioid crisis or an EpiPen that's needed. Again, I'm fully in support of this article.
Thank you, Mr. Gallivan. Mr. Trudell.
Trudell, Precinct 4 and Finance Committee Chair. When the article first came before us, we spent the good part of an entire meeting just trying to get our hands around what this and the other union contracts are going to mean to us down the road. So we basically tabled it for an additional night. But what came to my personal reason to vote in favor was that it's year 3 of a 3-year contract. And I think through our debate, town administration, police chief, and members of the union got a feel for how much we really were concerned about this issue, and that this will only be a 1 year of the union contract. And when they approach the next union contract, they may take a different approach to how they handle this issue. And that was the reason I voted in favor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trudell. Ms. Grace.
Thank you. Audrey Grace, RTM Precinct 6. I am against this, and not because I don't think that the police do a wonderful job and that they're responsible for saving lives, but I'm looking through this whole packet with COVID times, and my understanding is this contract was negotiated before we knew what is now the economic impact of COVID. And I think if we were negotiating it now, we'd realize that we may have to make different choices. I also noticed that in the capital budget, there's the approval for 2 new cars. And when my household suffers a loss, that, I reallocate money to what is needed most. And if the town agrees that EpiPens and life-saving measures deserve a stipend, then maybe we don't have an unmarked police cruiser. And so I think I'm voting against this article simply because I think that, like Deb Patterson shared, that we can find the money elsewhere, and it determining priorities for the town. Thank you.
My name is Mark Sullivan, Precinct 3 RTM, also a member of the Finance Committee. As Mark, Chairman, just mentioned, the Finance Committee struggled with this whole issue of stipends. Everyone's job changes. Did you get a stipend every time your job changes? But what convinced me to support this article was, and Mr. Moderator, if I could get confirmation, during the big meeting we had, the second meeting, there was an attorney there, and the attorney mentioned that under Massachusetts law, the issuance of first responder type of medications like the police officers are being required to do is a substantial change in their job responsibility, and therefore would warrant additional compensation. So it's outside the scope of the normal, quote, public safety police officers' responsibilities. They're accepting it. They're entitled to be compensated for it, and that convinced me to change my vote. But again, I want to confirm that that's what the attorney said.
Chief Carmichael, are you able to confirm that? Or Mr. Johnson?
Yes, Mr. Sullivan, I can confirm that Labor Council did in fact say that, and it was change of working conditions that summed it up, basically. You're correct.
Thank you.
Any further questions or comments with regard to Article 3? There being none, this motion requires a simple majority vote. I can't say with your indoor voices, which is where the cards will help, but all those in favor, please say aye and raise your green card. All those opposed, please say no and raise your red card. The ayes have it. It is a vote. We are now going to go to Article 4. At this time, I am going to remove myself from the stage. For those of you that don't know, my son was hired at the beginning of the pandemic to the fire department as a paramedic and is currently undergoing fire training. So I will be removing myself from this, and the town clerk will take over, and town council will come up to the stage to assist her.
So for Article 4, the motion pursuant to Article 4 states as follows. It is readily moved and seconded that the town vote to approve the monetary items in an agreement between the town of Walpole and the Walpole Permanent Firefighters Association, Local 2464, for the period of July 1st, 2020 to June 30th, 2023, and to raise and appropriate from taxation the sum of $99,700 to defray the fiscal year 2021 cost of said agreement. This is a petition of the Select Board. Mr. Trudell, Finance Committee?
Finance Committee voted favorable action 12-1-1.
Thank you, Mr. Trudell. Mr. Barrett, the Select Board vote?
Select Board voted 5-0-0, favorable action.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Are there any questions or comments in regard to Article 4?
John O'Leary, RTM Precinct 3. My argument in this article is similar to the last one. While they're getting a pay raise, which I'm sure that firefighters in Walpole are well deserving of, the stipend listed on the second page of the changes is basically giving a portion of the firefighters a double raise. So instead of getting a 2% raise, they're getting a 4% raise, which I feel is out of whack with the economic times we're in. So I stand to vote against this with the issues of the stipends once again. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Leary. Are there any other questions or comments in regard to Article 4? There being none, this motion requires a simple majority vote. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your green card. All opposed, say no and raise your red card. Motion carries, it's a vote.
Thank you, Liz. Article 5, the DPW contract. It is regularly moved and seconded that the town vote to approve the monetary items in an agreement between the town of Walpole and the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, AFL-CIO State Council 93, Local 1957 Department of Public Works Union for the period July 1, 2020 to June 30, 2023, to raise and appropriate from taxation the sum of $30,000 to defray the fiscal year 2021 cost of said agreement. This is the petition of the Select Board. Mr. Trudell, the Finance Committee vote.
Finance Committee voted favorable action 1301.
That's 1301. Thank you, Mr. Trudell. Mr. Barrett, the Select Board vote.
The Select Board voted 5-0 favorable action.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Any questions or comments with regard to Article 5? There being none, this motion requires a simple majority vote. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your green card. All those opposed, please say no and raise your red card. It is a unanimous vote. Thank you. Article 6, the Town Hall clerical contract. It is regularly moved and seconded that the town vote to approve the monetary items in an agreement between the town of Walpole and the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, AFL-CIO, State Council 93, Local 1957 Clerical Union for the period July 1, 2020 to June 30, 2023, and to raise and appropriate from taxation the sum of $10,500 to defray the fiscal year 2021 cost of said agreement. This is a petition of the Select Board. Mr. Trudell, the Finance Committee vote.
Finance Committee voted favorable action 1202.
Thank you, Mr. Trudell. Mr. Barrett, the Select Board vote.
The Select Board voted favorable action 5-0.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Are there any questions or comments with regard to Article 6? There being none, motion requires a simple majority vote. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, please say no. It is a unanimous vote. Thank you. Article 7, the Public Safety Dispatcher Contract. It is regularly moved and seconded that the town vote to approve the monetary items in an agreement between the town of Walpole and the Massachusetts Coalition of Police, IUPA, AFL-CIO, Local 466, Walpole Public Safety Dispatchers Union for the period July 1, 2020 to June 30, 2023, and to raise and appropriate from taxation the sum of $21,000 to defray the fiscal year 2021 cost of said agreement. This is a petition of the Board of Selectmen. Mr. Trudell, the Finance Committee vote.
Finance Committee voted favorable action 860.
860. Thank you. Favorable. Thank you, Mr. Trudell. Mr. Barrett, the Select Board vote.
The Select Board voted favorable action 5-0.
500. Favorable. Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Any questions or comments with regard to Article 7? Mr. O'Leary.
John O'Leary, Precinct 3. I guess to you, Mr. Moderator, could someone explain the exact duties of the dispatchers? Maybe I'm not understanding what their duties are.
Chief Carmichael. Chief, I think there's a microphone right over there.
There we go. Good afternoon. So our dispatch's primary responsibility, they have moved to combined dispatch. So we now have at least 2 dispatchers on duty 24 hours a day. They are responsible for all emergencies, the 911 system, text 911, and all radio communications for the police and fire department. So we have one dedicated radio interoperability system for the fire department and one for the police department. And they do work, obviously, together during any type of critical incident. We want to raise the standards of the police department. So over the last couple of years, our dispatchers, they are trained in emergency medical dispatch, which means when somebody calls 911 and it's a medical emergency, that the dispatchers are responsible for providing care until the first responders arrive to that location. So it's very important that they're aware of what to do and how to handle those types of situations. The issue with our dispatchers, we trained them a couple of years ago in AED, automatic external defibrillators. We trained them in the lock zone. Now we want to train them in line with what we're doing with the police officers with the EpiPen. And the reason why we want to do that is, again, to raise our standard. But many times people come into the police station, they come into the lobby with medical emergency. And the only people that are occupying the police station at that time may be our dispatchers. They also are responsible for checking on prisoners. And many times we've had prisoners come into the station and they've overdosed either in our booking room or in a cell. And our dispatchers are trained in administering the lock zone. They are not first responders like police officers are. They're not at that level of care. However, we are allowed to train them, like I said, in the AED, in the lock zone, and in EpiPen. So that's a change in their working condition. Again, we're asking them to do something that's not traditionally their responsibility. I think that it raises the standard of the police department in the event that somebody comes into the station and they're suffering from a medical emergency. Hopefully that answers it.
Thanks, Chief Carmichael.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Leary. Any further questions or comments? There being none, this motion requires a simple majority vote. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your green card. All those opposed, please say no and raise your red card. It is a vote. The motion carries. Favorable action. Article 8. This is on the library contract. It is regularly moved and seconded that the town vote to approve the monetary items in an agreement between the town of Walpole and the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, AFL-CIO, State Council 93, Local 1957 Library Union for the period July 1, 2020 to June 30, 2023, to raise and appropriate from taxation the sum of $5,500 to defray the fiscal year 2021 cost of said agreement. This is a petition of the Select Board. Mr. Trudell, the Finance Committee vote.
Finance Committee voted favorable action, 14-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Trudell. Mr. Barrett, Select Board vote.
The Select Board voted favorable action, 5-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Are there any questions or comments with regard to Article 8? There being none, this motion requires a simple majority vote. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your green card. All those opposed, please say no and raise your red card. It is a unanimous favorable vote. Thank you. Article 9, this is the Personnel Board salary schedule. It is regularly moved and seconded that the town vote to approve the new salary schedule as recommended by the Personnel Board and as found on file in the office of the town clerk, and to raise and appropriate from taxation the sum of $87,090 to defray the fiscal year 2021 cost of said schedule. This is a petition of the Personnel Board. Mr. Trudell, the Finance Committee vote.
Finance Committee voted favorable action, 11-0-3.
Thank you, Mr. Trudell. Mr. Barrett, the Select Board vote.
The Select Board voted favorable action, 5-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Any questions or comments with regard to Article 9? There being none, This motion requires a simple majority vote. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your green card. All those opposed, please say no and raise your red card. It is a unanimous vote. Thank you. Article 10, capital infrastructure improvements. It is regularly moved and seconded that the town vote to transfer funds from the following sources to implement a capital improvement program to protect, improve, and or modify the physical infrastructure, including but not limited to treatment plants, sewer and pump stations, traffic design, turf replacement facilities, and other properties of the town of Walpole, as listed in the sheet entitled Fall Capital Budget, October 17th, 2020, that can be found in the town meeting packet for Article 10 under the columns entitled Funding Source and the FinCom recommendation, and further that the select board is authorized to take any other action necessary and convenient to carry out these projects. This is a petition of the select board. Mr. Trudell, the finance committee vote.
Finance Committee voted favorable action 13-0-0.
That, folks, for those of you that might not have seen, that number is $1,242,119. 1400? 1300, thank you. Mr. Barrett, the select board vote.
The select board voted favorable action 5-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. And Mr. Forsberg, the capital budget vote.
Action 6-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Forsberg. Are there any questions or comments with regard to Article 10? There being none, this motion requires a simple majority vote. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your green cards. Thank you. All those in opposed, please say no and raise your red card. It is a unanimous vote. Thank you. Article 11, capital equipment. It is regularly moved and seconded that the town vote to appropriate a total sum of $993,800 from cable funds, free cash, water retained earnings, and sewer retained earnings for the purchase and equipping of capital equipment, including but not limited to vehicles, machinery, and computer network systems for the various departments of the town of Walpole, all as more specifically listed in the Fall Capital Budget, October 17, 2020, that can be found in the town meeting member packet for Article 11 under the columns entitled Funding Source and FinCom Recommendation. Fall 2020 Capital Budget for Article 12. 11, excuse me, apologies. And further, that the select board is authorized to take any other action necessary or convenient to carry out these projects. This is a petition of the select board. Mr. Trudell, Finance Committee vote.
Finance Committee voted 13-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Trudell. Mr. Barrett, the select board vote.
The select board voted favorable action 5-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Mr. Forsberg, capital budget.
Mr. Moderator, the Capital Budget Committee voted 6-0-0, but in the amount of $1,053,800, and that was prior to the high school sign being pulled from the warrant.
Thank you, Mr. Forsberg. And folks, that is the difference for the $993,800 in the motion. And Mr. Trudell, that was the Finance Committee vote, 993, correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Any questions or comments with regard to Article 11? Mr. O'Leary. Don't worry, Mr. O'Leary, I'm not counting you 3 minutes and you walk to the microphone.
To you, Mr. Morris, just some questions. The funding source is listed as cable for the school department related. Could someone explain that?
Mr. Johnson?
Yes. That is the PEG fund, which has approximately as of a few days ago, $1,306,400. So that's the PEG fund that has to be used for specific use related to technology, computer equipment, communication equipment there.
There's an item for an emergency management truck in the amount of $5,000. Could someone explain that item, please?
Mr. Johnson?
Sure. We're actually, the fire department got rid of a 1994 older brush truck. The truck had about 28,000 miles on it. And the older emergency management truck had over 100. It was all rusted out. So we just took that, repurposed it, and we are actually going to just take some of the paint off it, not fully repaint it, but just do some
So
fix the brakes.
it's refurbishing an existing vehicle.
Correct. That's why it's so small.
And I had a question on the police department section. Could someone explain the difference in cost between the marked police cruiser and the unmarked? What causes the difference in price?
Mr. Johnson?
I can speak to it, and if I didn't cover it, the chief can sure can follow. As part of the original budget request back, we were setting the budget back in, resetting the budget back in April, May, and June. The police department had requested a cruiser for about $58,000. In order to make the budget balance for the most part, that item was reduced, and I explained to the chief that we tried to do it in the fall, just as part of the capital. The marked cruisers are based in part in the budget, so we don't have to come back every year because they're on us for the most part 3-year cycle there. And as far as marked cruiser versus unmarked cruiser, that's the soft vehicles you see the chief, the deputy, the lieutenant driving around in. It's all stacked out with the cage in the back, the plastic seats in the back, and all the Walpole police decor on it. Did I cover everything?
He gave the thumbs up.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Leary. Any further questions or comments on Article 11? There being none, this motion requires a simple majority vote. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your green card. All those opposed, please say no and raise your red card. It is a favorable vote. Thank you. Article 12, appropriation for road projects. It is moved and seconded that the town vote to appropriate the total sum of $1,314,618 to resurface, repair, and/or reconstruct certain streets, parking lots, paved areas, and/or sidewalks, to make drainage improvements in certain town roads, to rebuild certain manholes and catch basins in the town of Walpole, including all incidental and related costs. To meet this appropriation, to transfer the sum of $774,618 from Chapter 90 funds and $540,000 from free cash, all as more specifically set forth in the sheet entitled Fall Capital Budget, October 17, 2020, that can be found in the town meeting member packet for Article 12 under columns entitled Funding Source and the FinCom recommendation. And further, that the Board of Selectmen is authorized to take any other action necessary and convenient to carry out the projects. This is a petition of the Select Board. Mr. Trudell, the Finance Committee vote.
Finance Committee voted favorable action 14-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Trudell. Mr. Barrett, the Select Board vote.
The select board voted favorable action 5-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. And Mr. Forsberg, Capital Budget.
Capital Budget Committee voted favorable action 6-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Forsberg. Any questions or comments with regard to Article 12? Yes, over here.
Sarah Katib, Precinct 8. Just a question through you, Mr. Moderator. It mentions certain parking lots. Just wondering if those have been identified, which parking lots are getting improvements?
Mr. Johnson?
Sure. We're going to see how far the 400,000 can take us, but the primary area that we're going to initially focus on is the impact of the downtown business district. As you may recall, the fire station, we only paved up to a certain spot when we renovated the fire station, and we want to
Thank you, Ms. Khatib. Any other questions or comments? There being none, this motion requires a simple majority vote. Just waiting for Ms. Khatib to get back to her seat and her card. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your green card. All those opposed, please say no and raise your red card. It is a unanimous vote. Thank you. Article 13, appropriation and borrowing authorization for road improvements. It is regularly moved and seconded that the town vote to appropriate the sum of $200,000 for improvements to various streets within the town, consisting of the construction, reconstruction, and resurfacing of public ways or widening thereof, including land damages and cost of concrete, macadam, and other pavement and or road material of similar lasting character, and sidewalks constructed or reconstructed in connection with such improvements, including the payment of costs incidental or related thereto, and that to meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the select board, is authorized to borrow said sum under Mass General Laws, Chapter 44, Sections 7 or 8, or any other enabling authority, and issue bonds and notes therefore, and that any premium received by the town upon the sale of any bonds or notes approved by this vote, less any premium applied to the payment of the costs of issuance of such bonds or notes, may be applied to the payment of costs approved hereunder in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 20, thereby reducing by a like amount the amount authorized to be borrowed to pay such costs, and further, that the select board is authorized to take any other action necessary and convenient to carry out this project. This is a petition of the select board. Mr. Trudell, the Finance Committee vote.
Finance Committee voted favorable action 14-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Trudell. Mr. Barrett, the select board vote.
The select board voted favorable action 5-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Mr. Forsberg.
Capital Budget Committee voted favorable action 6-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Forsberg. Any questions or comments with regard to Article 13? There being none, this motion requires a 2/3 vote. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your green card. All those opposed, please say no and raise your red card. It is a unanimous vote. Thank you. Article 14, appropriation to the stabilization fund. It is regularly moved and seconded that the town vote to transfer from free cash the sum of $3 million for the purpose of supplementing the stabilization fund as authorized by Chapter 40, Section 5B of the Massachusetts General Laws. It's 14. Stabilization is 14. That's okay. This is a petition of the select board. Mr. Trudell, the Finance Committee vote.
Finance Committee voted favorable action 14-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Trudell. Mr. Barrett, select board vote.
The select board voted favorable action 5-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Any questions or comments with regard to Article 14? You don't need to run. You're just on the turf. You can't help it, can you?
Thank you, Nancy Gallivan, Precinct 8 and school committee member. I do support this article, but I want to make 3 points before the vote's taken. This is the largest deposit that's ever been made into the stabilization account. And different from other years, depending on who you ask, there's a likelihood that we will need to draw on this money for both operating and other expenses in FY22 and beyond. Taking money out of stabilization would require a 2/3 vote, and this would be a first-time occurrence. So in my opinion, town meeting members should just be aware of this likelihood when they take this vote. With that knowledge, I do believe that placing the money in stabilization now is the right decision.
Thank you, Ms. Gallivan.
Liz Barrows, Precinct 1. My question might have partially been addressed. Mr. Moderator, since I'm kind of not familiar with the budget entirely how it works. My question was, obviously anything that we want to use as a town from free cash goes in front of town meeting, but is it the same process when we utilize money from the stabilization account?
Yes, any funds taken from the stabilization account require a 2/3 vote of the town meeting.
Okay, and what, is there a certain amount we have to keep in the stabilization account?
Not to my knowledge, Mr. Trudell.
Stabilization is basically our rainy day fund. Whatever we determine we want to set aside for future emergencies is adequate for us. The more that we carry in the stabilization, the more favorable our bond rating is, so we pay less when we borrow money. So there's really no threshold that we should meet. There are guidelines that say you should have 5% of your budget set aside for a rainy day, but it's just, you know, a mark to get to. It's not really set in stone.
Okay, so it helps our bond rating, it's essentially the one benefit, okay.
Thank you, Ms. Barrows. Any further questions or comments with regard to Article 14? There being none, this motion requires a simple majority vote. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your green card. All those opposed, please say no and raise your red card. It is a unanimous vote. Thank you. Article 15, the appropriation to the OPEB fund. It is regularly moved and seconded that the town vote to transfer from free cash a sum of $250,000 for the purpose of supplementing the fund known as the Other Post-Employment Benefits Liability Trust Fund, OPED, as authorized by Chapter 32B, Section 20 of the Massachusetts General Laws. This is a petition of the Select Board. Mr. Trudell, the Finance Committee vote.
Finance Committee voted favorable action 8-6-0.
Thank you, Mr. Trudell. Mr. Barrett, the Select Board vote.
The Select Board voted favorable action 5-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Are there any questions or comments with regard to Article 15? There being none, this motion requires a simple majority vote. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your green card. All those opposed, please say no and raise your red card. It is a unanimous vote. Thank you. Article 18, 16 and 17 were in the consent agenda as a reminder. This is for the Walpole Media Corp. Fiscal Year 2021 operating budget. It is regularly moved and seconded that the town, pursuant to General Law, Chapter 44, Section 53, F and 3/4, transfer from the PEG Access and Cable-related fund the sum of $160,840 and appropriate the same as a grant to the Walpole Media Corporation to operate the Walpole Cable Access and PEG channels for fiscal year 2021. And further, to authorize the Select Board to execute a grant agreement with said corporation upon such terms and conditions as the Board deems appropriate. This is a petition of the Select Board. Mr. Trudell, the Finance Committee vote.
Finance Committee voted favorable action 12-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Trudell. And Mr. Barrett, Select Board vote.
The Select Board voted favorable action 4-0-1.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Any questions or comments with regard to Article 18? There being none, this motion requires a simple majority vote. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your green card. All those opposed, please say no and raise your red card. It is a vote. Favorable. Article 19, the zoning bylaws, inclusionary zoning. It is regularly moved and seconded that the town vote to amend the Walpole zoning bylaw as set forth in the warrant under Article 19. I think you all know this is a rather lengthy article, so I am not going to read it out. This is a petition of the Select Board. Mr. Trudell, the Finance Committee vote.
Finance Committee voted favorable action 14-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Trudell. Mr. Barrett, the Select Board vote.
5-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. And Mr. Conroy, the planning board vote.
The planning board voted 4-1-0, recommend back to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Conroy. That would be a Walpole Partnership, right? Housing Partnership Committee. Mr. Conroy, that refer back to committee as the Walpole Housing Partnership Committee.
Whoever it goes, well, it's sponsored by the selectmen, so however it goes.
All right, thank you. Mr. Barrett?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Moderator. The main message out of the select board's unanimous vote in favor of this article is that we as a town need to come together as residents, elected officials, and business people to address a glaring inequity that is currently impacting the lives of Walpole residents. 38% of households in Walpole spend more than 30% of their income on mortgage and rent. With over 9,000 households currently in Walpole, that's more than 3,000 households of seniors, young families, public safety employees, teachers, our neighbors and friends. That's 3,000 households who are not spending money in town, who are not going out to restaurants and spending in our businesses just so that they can afford their mortgages. A family of 4 that makes $85,000 a year ought to be able to make a home and raise a family here in Walpole, and right now they cannot. And the situation is going to become even more dire. As we know, we have a pandemic going on and an uncertain economic future for many of the town's families. The Walpole I know is a community that is going to stand by and do nothing while our friends and neighbors are struggling when we see these clear inequalities. The select board agrees that we must act to end it. Now, I know there is no silver bullet. There is no one bylaw that we could pass that will solve this problem. There's no bylaw that will calculate the perfect balance between price and density and housing. I wish there was. We looked for it. I'm not claiming that this IZB will change the world. However, what it does do is demonstrate that our community is committed to providing safe and affordable homes, and will use all of the tools available to us to do so. Tools that we know will benefit our community, residents, and businesses alike. And there's no amount of hypotheticals, what if this, and the what if that will never become reality. And it should not distract us from our goal, what we were elected to do, which is design bylaws that benefit our community as a whole. The select board is committed to working with developers in good faith to create affordable homes. This is a discussion the entire time. This is what the select board has said. We'll work to ensure that the town, through the ZBA, partners with developers to craft projects that serve our affordability needs, Walpole's, that fit with our neighborhoods, and that are financially sound. This includes options within the bylaws for adding units outside of the proposed development and even partnering on town-owned property. There are many options within this bylaw, as I'm sure you have seen from reading it. But we all know that zoning bylaws, like everything else that we do, must be regularly evaluated. We're committed to monitoring, evaluating, and reporting on the impact of this bylaw and to make changes if necessary over the next year and beyond. Many towns which have enacted these bylaws have done exactly that. They revisit it every year, and they make sure that it is working for the town and the entire community. The select board unanimously supported this bylaw because it is sorely needed, and further, it is in line with what most other towns have implemented, as I said. It's been vetted through many public hearings, listening sessions, legal reviews, professional inspections, mathematical modeling, and most importantly, has incorporated a huge portion of the information gathered from residents, from other boards, from RTMs.
Mr. Barrett,
over the last 2 years.
Your time is up. Please wrap up your comments.
I respectfully urge you to consider these facts to cast your vote in favor of this bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Mr. Trudell.
Mr. Moderator, through you, procedurally, this is a zoning bylaw recommendation. It requires a 2/3 vote. Through you, Mr. Moderator, if this body votes in favor and the Attorney General finds fault with it, does this bar the article from being implemented or modified in the near future.
Town council?
Mr. Moderator, through you, no, it does not bar the town from bringing it back under Chapter 40A, Section 5. If town meeting acts favorably upon a bylaw, there is no 2-year ban, and so it could be brought back.
Thank you, town council. Mr. Conroy?
What I'd like to do is talk about what happened at the public hearing, and just to summarize right off the bat, the 5 of us, no one said we didn't want to help. What it was based upon technical issues. We have a bunch of technical issues. That's what my job is, to make sure. One of them was the problem you have right now is in the warrant, you have 2 Section 5Is. This will replace Section 5I, and the South Walpole parking was also under 5I. You can't have 2 5Is. That's an issue. The next issue, which was brought up by an attorney, and it's very germane to this, is that you cannot have a special permit for subdivisions. And it was Wall Street versus Westwood, and it's been ruled by the highest court that you can't do it. So right now, right off the bat, we have an issue of legal problems down the road. So that's how we started going through these. Just so the people know some of the background, I went through and surrounding towns. And if you look at the surrounding towns, it's 1 page. This is an entire book. Medfield has it, only at the state hospital. Foxborough doesn't have it. Sharon has it. Norway does not. Mansfield has it, but they're all tipping points of like 7. What I wanted to say is this article here had the zoning board be the approval authority, which none of the other towns have that. And from my understanding, they never came to the zoning board. That's a real issue. The big crux that I brought out the other day, so everybody understands, is what they're supposed to do is if you have 6 houses, you can reduce the 6th house by 25%, and then you recreate how many square feet you have. So if you had to have 100,000 and your 6th one, it would maybe reduce it to 80,000 square feet total. But what it doesn't address, and that was pointed out, is you could take any lot in this town right now, and the zoning board could reduce it by to 25%. So everybody's lot out there would be subject to this. And there's nothing in there that says after 6 they want, but less than 6, you can, if you want to go in front of them and give them 4 lots on your house right now, your property, the way it reads is you can do it. That's an issue that has to be addressed. All these were brought up, and no one was running from them. It's just that you got to fix them, and especially the one about the legal one with a special permit, because we'll go nowhere. You'll have a nice bylaw that you may approve today. It's going to get challenged, and the whole thing will be struck. The other thing I should point out to a lot of you people who've been here for years, this overrides Resource Protection District. So if you have to have 80,000 square feet in a resource area, the overlay is wiped out. You can build 40,000 down to 20,000. So a lot of it's jumping over a lot of the bylaws we've had. But the main crux is there's some legal issues here between the 2 5Is and the special permit that don't make it going to work, no matter how much you like the article. So, as I said,
Mr. Conroy, please wrap up your argument.
no, it's not an argument. I'm just pointing out what happened, and everybody there was a landowner, and they didn't understand it either. But my opinion is, if you're going in with a zoning article that has legal issues, you don't want to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Conroy. I didn't mean you were arguing. Different term. Mr. Zakarowski.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Philip Sharofsky, Precinct 7, also a member of the Planning Board and a member of the Housing Partnership. And I was the member of the Planning Board that voted not to return it to committee. I do believe that we still should go forward with this bylaw. I know a lot of issues were raised at the Planning Board meeting. Many of them, and I just want to mention a couple that were that you could agree with, disagree with, but it didn't necessarily mean it was a defect in the way that the zoning bylaw was written. For example, it was mentioned that many things are discretionary to the zoning board of appeals, and that's to give the flexibility so projects can be designed in partnership with developers and with our zoning board. But through you, Mr. Moderator, I would like to ask town council the two questions. Is it a problem that we have two zoning bylaws that may have the same number? And
One moment, Mr. Zakarowski. Two things. First of all, I have a substitute motion to withdraw Article 20. To refer back to the petitioner from the petitioner for Article 26. So that resolves it. Town council also indicated that that's an editorial matter that could be addressed at a later point in time. Town council, I get that sharp enough. Thank you.
I also want to ask whether the second point raised, that was the what's that? What? The subdivision, yes, because many of these articles in other towns have exactly the same wording about the subdivision. That they have some special permit is required, even though it is a subdivision.
Town council.
Mr. Moderator, through you. My colleague John Eichmann reviewed this in detail, and my understanding is that he did not find any legal issues with it. And I will point out that if the Attorney General were to find a legal issue with it, they typically deal with it on a small section-by-section issue and refer it back to the town to address. So even if the Attorney General were to find a problem, it can be addressed by the town at the spring town meeting.
So I'm in favor of whether we withdraw this or not. I'm in favor that we need to have inclusionary zoning bylaws. We, as Mr. Barrett mentioned, we have a critical problem with affordable housing, and also we need to be more proactive. A lot of people question why aren't those large apartment buildings downtown Walpole? Why didn't we require affordable housing? And the answer is because we didn't have an inclusionary zoning bylaw.
Thank you, Mr. Czekowski. Ms. Katie.
Precinct 8, also planning board. So I am very much in support of the town taking a more proactive approach to increasing our affordable housing. Because of the dedicated work of the Housing Partnership and its members, more residents see the need for affordable housing and the need for the town to be more proactive. This really is extraordinary, but it's not enough. What I'm advocating for and what I'm asking now to make this IZB work is no small request. I'm advocating for a cultural shift at Town Hall. In large part, our community has recognized the need of our neighbors, people on fixed incomes, people who work in the town and others, to have access to housing that is affordable. To actually make that happen in reasonable numbers and within a reasonable time frame, to actually facilitate the construction of affordable housing, we will need developers and town officials to work cooperatively. Again, this is really no small feat, and in the past, the relationship has been quite adversarial. This has been a disservice to Walpole and its residents. For my part, as a member of the planning board, I have tried to always be reasonable with applicants. I use the town bylaws as a statement of the town's values to ensure that projects are built respecting the standards of the town. In cases where I've had the opportunity to be lenient, I have done so if I see the applicant is acting in good faith. Which leads me to the article at hand, the IZB. I, like many of you, received a letter from developer John Walsh. Mr. Walsh was kind enough to also have a 40-minute conversation with me. He highlighted some concerns on single-family subdivisions penciling with the IZB. he took the time to go over some numbers with me. When I offered to him that the IZB has flexible provisions, he countered that they're not guaranteed and they're up to the discretion of the members, and given past experience, cannot be relied on. It's true. It's not just John Walsh's concerns. I've talked to many developers, small business owners, residents that are extremely frustrated with getting approvals from Walpole town boards and committees. It's honestly a problem. It's a problem for Walpole, but it's a acute problem for developing affordable housing. It's the stated goal of the Walpole Housing Partnership that they wish to work with the ZBA and developers to craft good projects that add affordable housing. I know, and my fellow RTM should understand, if we are serious about adding affordable housing units to Walpole with this IZB, it must be done in a collaborative effort. I attended a really great talk recently on how towns can support economic development. And do you know the top two factors that influence business owners? It's not the tax rate, site conditions, or even parking. The top two factors are economic development, marketing, and timeliness of approvals. If we want to direct Walpole's growth, we have got to change the culture of town boards and committees. Now, let's be clear, some developers come into the process, they're belligerent.
Ms. Khatib, please wrap up your comments.
Respectfully, Mr. Moderator, have we set time limits?
Yes, we have 3 minutes per speaker.
Can I ask for more time, please?
All those in favor of additional time for Ms. Khatib, please say aye and raise your green cards. You may continue. I'm not even going to ask for the no's.
Thank you. So am I asking that we bend over backward for those developers? No, I'm not. But for the projects that developers bring under the IZB, there should be a certain level of respect and cooperation. We should understand that for a developer to bring a multi-unit project to the ZBA requires a significant amount of planning and financial investment. We have said as a town that we wish to incrementally and thoughtfully add affordable housing. An applicant appears before the ZBA because they want to develop in Walpole. They have decided that Walpole is a community worth their investment. We know this. We are all invested here and continue to invest in our community. And in exchange for developing our desirable community, the IZB would be requiring developers to work with us and offer some percentage of affordable. The ZBA can work with applicants on the location of units, develop sites that fit in with the surrounding neighborhoods, and Walpole can be better positioned to maintain our local control. We should all also be aware that there will be other large projects coming to Walpole. It's very possible that the Gilmore site will be developed to a mixed-use, multi-story project with residential in the very near future. We do not want another large project to be permitted before we start taking control. Given the assurances of Select Board Chair Ben Baird today, I am confident that we can permit IZB projects in a collaborative effort. Importantly, also, the Select Board is committed to evaluation of the IZB and achieving our goal, and that goal is adding affordable units for our housing stock. Please join me in support of this article.
Thank you, Ms. Petit. Ms. Zabady?
Katie Turco, Beatty, Precinct 3. I'm also a member of the planning board, and I despise getting up and speaking in front of everybody, so bear with me if I stumble. The housing partnership was given a hard task. Their intentions are definitely great, but just because it has been a year and a half does not mean this article is ready. This is a huge undertaking, and it's a big change. It should not just be pushed through to get something in. We can't say we will try this and see how it goes. It needs to be 100% vetted, and I don't feel it has been. We heard or will hear many points as to why this is good. And I hope everybody had time to review the email I sent with the attachment of the planning board meeting, because I think it brought up a lot of good points. One point really floored me, and I don't know if John Lee is here and if he's willing to get up, but this article is written so that it goes through the zoning board for review. but the planning board was repeatedly brought the revisions and asked to have meetings and discuss it, have sidebar conversations. I can't tell you how many drafts I received and how many hours I spent going line by line, reviewing it and writing down comments. But yet it's the zoning board who will institute it, and the zoning board never received the drafts for review or had meetings or was asked for feedback. That's a huge problem for me. That says it is not vetted. Another issue I have is there is no cap. And I've heard alternate views. I've heard this will not get us where we need to be. I've heard this could get us higher than we need to be. I really feel that we need, if we reach the requirement, to take a pause. We're supposed to be 10% affordable. If we decide as a community we want to go to 11 or 12, that's fine. But we don't want to go on unlimited. That will change our community greatly. I'm in favor of affordable housing. I think Walpole definitely needs it. But I also feel a plan should not change our community or try to make us into another community. We are Walpole. Whether you were born here or you chose to live here, we're a nice community, and you've stayed because you like what we have and how we operate. I believe we can add affordable and still remain Walpole. And that is why I ask you not to vote in favor of this and push it through and see what happens. I feel if all the people who have come forward over the last week and said they're interested in taking part and helping, if everyone's committed to do that, we can see this through and get it done within a reasonable amount of time. And I would like to see that happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Beatty. Mr. Hamilton.
Bill Hamilton, Precinct 5. I rise in opposition to this because it's silent on where it's going to get the water. Planner O'Leary ran the numbers and came up with 7,000 new units in order for this article to reach 10%. That is more units than we can afford to put water in right now. There is no plan in this article to obtain water from anywhere else. And if we have to go to the MWRA, I'm very concerned for my neighbors in Precinct 5 and 4 and 6 who live, like myself, within a mile of the sludge dump. Because I would think that if the MWRA got control of our water supply by selling us water, that
Mr. Hamilton, please stay on point.
well, that they would ask that sludge be delivered to Walpole. And if sludge
Mr. Hamilton, back on point, please. We're talking about the inclusionary zoning, not the sludge in the MWRA.
well, you need water. For this inclusionary zoning, you need water. To get water, you go into the MWRA, and they want to give us sludge. Now, we have fought them, and if we don't fight them, we'll get sludge. And that will possibly
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. Do you have other comments you'd like to pursue with regards to the article?
Yes.
Then continue.
Can anyone answer where the water is going to come from for these new units? Then the MWRA is here. It's right with us. Because that's the only place right now that seems viable to get water. The MWRA has brought their water up Route 1 to Gillette Stadium. And they're already selling water to customers in Walpole. Siemens being the largest customer.
Mr. Hamilton, we've got your point on the water. Unfortunately, no one wants to come forward to speak to the water right now. You made your point. Let's get back to the article and stop going down the MWRA path.
Well, I hope that we don't go down the MWRA path. So I speak against this article because it hasn't done the planning. It's silent on where they will get the water to build these 7,000 units. And without a plan to do that, we must vote this down because we cannot afford to risk putting the town of Walpole in the position of owing the MWRA. Cannot do it. And if we did do it, we risk going into receivership. happen if we got sludge. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. Ms. Lowry, you are next.
Good afternoon, Julie Laurie, Precinct 5. I just want to start off by saying that about a week ago, I was in full support of this article, and it wasn't without already doing some research. I was ready to vote yes. But as I started to do more research and watched every single meeting that was involved with the development of this article, feedback from residents, builders, stakeholders, non-stakeholders, I started to second guess it. And it's not because I don't believe we need affordable housing. It's very obvious that we do. The question is, how do we do it? And this bylaw, as drafted today, is not ready to be implemented. There are too many what-ifs, too many issues with it, and I think it will open up the door for loopholes that could be abused, open up the door for litigation. I respect the town council saying that it doesn't have any legal issues as drafted now, but that can change once it's implemented, and that's my concern. The Housing Partnership has clearly devoted a ton of time to this, and I commend you for that. And I understand your underlying desire is to get affordable housing in Walpole, and I commend you for it, and I agree with it. Like I said, I was ready to vote for this about a week ago. And I can also say that I don't have, I can make clear that I'm in or near South Walpole. We're faced with the 40B housing project right now, and it's not fun, and it's not going to have a good result for our area, and quite frankly, it's not going to have a good result for the entire town of Walpole. You're going to feel it in your pocketbooks when the taxes go up, when we have to support 300 units there, schools, fire, police. But I digress.
Thank you.
As drafted now, I think there are too many logistical and technical issues with it, and I just don't think it's ready for prime time today. And I think it's something that if we keep having developers in town also, you need to be called to task and get to the table and not wait until the eve before something's being voted on and start getting active. And that goes for business owners in downtown that have concerns. You guys have to start meeting halfway and start working with the Housing Partnership in order to get to a mutual point where something like this bylaw can actually work for the town. I'm going to repeat that as drafted right now, I think it's going to open up the door to a whole can of worms, a lot of issues, a lot of litigation, and I think we're going to have owner's remorse. I never believe in voting for something just to vote for it or just for the greater good. You need to break this down as to how it's going to affect this town, how it's going to affect business owners, landowners, even the residents. I wish I could vote for it. I really do. And like I said, I was ready to do it about a week ago, but after reviewing a ton of material, all of the meetings, all of the feedback, I'm voting no. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lowry. Sir.
Good afternoon, Mr. Moderator. Bill O'Connell,
I thought so.
Precinct 4. I think the article, it may be well-intentioned, and I appreciate the Affordable Partnership's time and effort. I know they've worked on it, but I would submit that it's not good for the town, and that the costs substantially, there could be substantial costs and unintended consequences. I attended the planning board hearing last week, and as Chairman Conroy had mentioned earlier, there were some issues with respect to both technical and substantive issues in the body of the bylaw. I looked at Section 6A of the bylaw. There was some inconsistent language regarding density, and I think some of the density is reduced by 75%, 75% or 50% is language that gives the zoning board discretion, and then there's zoning that mandates, there's language that mandates that the zoning board basically grant a waiver for reduced dimensional requirements. What had mentioned the sunset provision earlier, Also, that taking this out of the planning board's hands, and I know the planning board deals with subdivisions, and potentially there could be a question there. With respect to Article 20, I know we're not there yet, but I know they're late, Mr. Moderator, but my concern is that basically the town is going to act as a quasi-developer. This board, whoever is appointed, will act as a quasi-developer. I would submit that, there's going to be some costs administering this trust fund. They're acting as a developer.
Mr. O'Connell, please stay with Article 19 for now.
Sure.
The trust fund.
Well, I would submit that they're linked and that it's going to cost the town substantial amounts of money. It could cost the town substantial amounts of money. One point of clarification, if I could, through you, Mr. Moderator, is with respect to the potential technical deficiency the town council had spoke to earlier with respect to the 2.5Is. I wasn't sure if the AG's office had an issue with that. You had indicated that it wouldn't close the 2-year application process or bringing it back. But if there were 2.5Is, would that potentially present a technical issue that resulting in the AG's office disapproving this article?
Mr. O'Connell, just to repeat, first of all, there is a substitute motion to refer Article 26 with the 5I back to the petitioner that we'll be taking up later. So that's one. But second is that town council indicated that an editorial issue like that can be addressed at a later point in time. Would not oversee. Town council.
And Mr. Moderator, just from a technical perspective, not understanding the substitute motion provisions, and I know you had mentioned it earlier, but were the substitute motions submitted 24 hours prior to?
Yes, they were.
And the substitute motions that are coming up were submitted 24 hours prior to the hearing?
They were, sir.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Mr. O'Connell. Mr. Flowers.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. Through you, Mr. Moderator. My name's Andrew Flowers. I'm RTM for Precinct 4. I'm also a member of the Finance Committee, and I am the chair of the Walpole Housing Partnership Committee. Over the last 15 months, I've spent literally hundreds of hours working in good faith with the WHP members as we reached out to residents, land use attorneys, housing experts, planners, and the various boards in Walpole, from the select board, the planning board, the finance committee, and so forth. And these have all been really good faith interactions. I really respect everyone who's spoken so far today, for or against. But I'm here to argue that we should vote yes on Article 19. And it boils down to these twin problems that we're facing here in Walpole. One is the real dire need for affordable housing, and the other problem is that we have unwanted 40B developments. And a perfect crystallization of our failure here, I think, is the two downtown market rate apartment developments, where you have over 300 units, none of them are affordable, and a lot of people are asking, wait a second, we have 7% affordable in this town, so we're below the 10% threshold, and we have 5 40B developments, and when we have these huge apartment complexes, we're just putting ourselves further behind the 8 ball. And so for a year and a half, we've had this wide, diverse group of people, Democrats, Republicans, progressives, conservatives. We've worked together in a pragmatic way to address a concrete need. So, the inclusionary zoning bylaw, I try to communicate with our teams as best I can to walk through the technical details of it. And I think a lot of folks who've just spoken have gotten cold feet because of the planning board public hearing this week, just 3 days ago. And so I just want to address the issues that came up, both legal and zoning issues at that hearing right now. So the overall argument I'm making is that Article 19 is both legally and technically sound. And I get that the planning board and RTMs, they have every right to scrutinize this, but we shouldn't let last-minute second guessing override the due diligence done by town council, not one person, but several land use attorneys. Jonathan Eichman, as the town council here today, mentioned Stabilization has worked with us for over a year. The last minute second guessing of housing experts, from Ashley Clark, the director of community and economic development, to several housing consultants the town has hired. Let's go through the objections and questions that were raised at the planning board public hearing. Legally, and
Excuse me, Mr. Flowers, as you're approaching the end, you would like to ask the body for extra time?
May I please have some more time?
Body, all those in favor, please say aye. And raise your green cards. You may continue, Mr. Flowers.
Thank you. So again, all this is really good faith discussion. I really respect the eagerness of the planning board, from Chairman Conroy to Katie Beatty, who has already spoken. They asked great questions, but we can have good faith disagreements, and they think there are legal and technical issues that should delay this further. And after consulting with the experts, I disagree. So let's go through the legal objections that were raised at the planning board public hearing Wednesday night. First, this bylaw does not conflict with the subdivision control law. So that's been raised, and it's been already answered. Second, there was, and this comes from, I think, Phil Mackey was the gentleman's name. Really nice guy, gave a long series of comments, and I think he represents a few developers in town. And he disclosed that, but I just want to go through his comments here. He said that there's a parking waiver in the Article 19, and that it conflicts with another part of the current zoning bylaws. It does not. There's no legal conflict there. Second, he said the paid in lieu fee, which is in Section 7D, that it could be exposing the town to legal liability. That's not true. It's not an unconstitutional taking, and there's plenty of case law, again, from the work done by town council to point to say that it won't be unconstitutional. Also, the planning board public hearing, there were just kind of a vague, I don't want to say vague, it seems uncharitable, but there was kind of a fuzzy call for more clarity in the zoning regulations. And I agree. I think we need to embark on a comprehensive zoning rewrite, but the vehicle for that is not this article. That's going to be a multi-year undertaking. There were questions raised by Phil Mackey about conflicting section 8 and 9, where it has a non-binding recommendation from the WHP to the Zoning Board of Appeals. That has no legal bearing. Also, that there was a recommendation signed off by town council in section 9. Again, these are just a series of a flood of arguments put forth by some 3 days before town meeting that have already been addressed by town council. But then, moving beyond the legal issues, there were zoning questions, right? There's this notion that several landowners who came up and spoke and disliked the notion that the 6-unit threshold, they felt like that was financially feasible. Mr. John Walsh wrote a letter. I wrote a long response back to him. A nice guy, and in his replies, he makes the argument that starting at 6 units, this is economically just not viable. Well, contrary to that, we've worked with a housing consultant to do some mathematical modeling, pro forma models for 6-unit, non-luxury, single-family developments, whether it's or multifamily developments, and they do in fact pencil. Now, if you can straw man the argument and can create like, hey, let's build 6 $2 million homes, well, if that's the exception that proves the rule, that I think that's a kind of development the town doesn't need, because it puts us further behind our 10% threshold. A few more points, and I'll wrap up. There was this argument made by Katie Beatty and others that we need a sunset provision, so that once we hit 10%, we should put on the brakes. I think that's like a good idea in theory, but we can cross that bridge when we get there. I mean, we're at 7% SHI, and people are trying to be concerned about getting too high. I think let's get 10% first, and then we can fix it there. There's no initiative here to put affordable housing above 15%, above, and people throwing out huge numbers, 20, 30%. There's no way it's going to get there. I would be shocked if this helps us ever, get above 11%. And the sunset provision, again, I really respectfully take that argument, but we can address that later. Last point I'll make is that there was an argument made that this allows for the segmentation of lots. Well, in 2 ways. One, that people could bypass the law by just selling 5 lots at a time to skirt it. There's actually an explicit provision preventing segmentation in the bylaws. So that's fine. But then the other point I think raised earlier today about how this is a quadruple density in town because there's no limit in terms of the lot size waiver in 6A for 25 or 50% or a 75% lot size reduction. Just again, the pro forma modeling on this is just that that's not going to happen. We're not going to suddenly have 100,000 people in Walpole and have huge density. The reality is that this is a very, very modest improvement towards maintaining or even increasing a little bit our share of affordable housing. We badly need it. Someone's mentioned Gilmore's as a property. Gilmore's could be sold and developed into 200 units of apartment buildings with zero affordable, and we're back to where we started again. So again, I think there's a wide group of citizens who've worked on this. It is technically and legally sound. We wait last fall town meeting, pulled this. We referred it to committee to study it for another year. Now, if you disagree with it philosophically, that's fine, but this is absolutely ready for prime time. So let's vote on it, and I encourage you to vote yes.
Thank you, Mr. Flowers. Yep.
Robert O'Leary, Precinct 3, through you, Mr. Moderator. Just a comment. I don't believe the zoning board should have any added authority here. We're an appointed board, which they are by the selectmen. And I think it might lead us in the direction or give the appearance of possibly some biased decision-making. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Leary. Mr. Gallivan.
Mark Gallivan, Select Board, and RTM Precinct 8. I speak in favor of this article. We've needed it for a long time. It's the right thing to do for current residents and future residents of Walpole. Some people have asked, why have we waited so long to pass an article like this that would prevent apartments from being built downtown that don't have any affordable units? And I'll admit right now, I'm part of the problem. I've been a select board member for over 9 years. I didn't recognize this as a big problem. I didn't work on this. I didn't focus on this. But we finally got it. We understood this was a real issue, and we put the Housing Partnership Committee together, and I think they've done a great job. I think it's now important for us to continue to move this forward. We've heard a lot of people come forward in the last couple of weeks talking about the little imperfections, the little issues, potential legal, potential this. I think implementing ICB is a process. Is this document perfect? No. Like all zoning, you put forward zoning, you recognize new ideas or issues or problems, you modify zoning, and you continue. So I do support this. And I would ask all the people who have come forward in the last couple of weeks, whether they're developers, lawyers, owners of land, I'd ask the planning board, the chairman and the members, the zoning board, the chairman and the members to get involved in this process. Whether we pass it tonight, which I hope, or whether we don't pass it and we continue to move forward, this is an ongoing process. And all of those experts can help us by putting their expertise to work to make sure that we actually have a great zoning law in Walpole and great inclusionary zoning. Think about all the people that can't live in Walpole. You know, I have friends whose kids can't live in Walpole, can't afford to buy a home here. I have friends whose kids can't afford to rent an apartment in Walpole. I think it's important that we all recognize that we do need a broad spectrum of housing. Please consider this item with your vote. I do support this article. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gallivan. Mr. Sullivan.
Mark Sullivan, Precinct 3. I think what really struck me over the last several discussions, several days, is Walpole, 40B was passed 50 years ago. 50 years later, Walpole hasn't still taking meaningful steps to address the challenges that 40B poses. So we've had a group of citizens pull together, come up with this plan. It's gone on for several years now. And, I think now's the time for us to move forward. I understand there may be issues. I understand it's difficult to jump into the deep water when you're not sure what's below it. But it's been 50 years. You've had this dedicated group of volunteers, both town officials and private citizens, come to this point right now. And my concern is this. If we don't move forward with this now, then that's it. is really, how much longer do we really want to talk about this in the springtime? Because the same arguments will be there. Maybe we'll address one issue, something else will come up. But in the meantime, these large projects continue to come into town, and the town has no mechanism to deal with them, so they can do what they want. So as you just decide today with your vote, whatever it may be, just realize this is probably the last opportunity, because frankly, will the town want to keep doing this next spring? Then it'll be next fall, then it'll be another. They've been thinking about this for 50 years, so I'm really of the opinion today is the day whether we decide to go forward with this as a town or not. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Mr. O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and through you to the body, I'm Jim O'Neill, Precinct 8, and a member of the Select Board, and I stand in support of the article, as I have my other 4 board members on the Select Board. I think it is time for us to address this issue. It's a long-standing item that's been plaguing our community for a long time, and to be honest with you, 40B isn't something that's new. This is something that we should have addressed a long time ago. The Select Board did recognize that a couple years ago, commissioned the Affordable Housing Committee. We put together a housing production plan that was approved by the state. In that housing production plan was the inclusionary zoning bylaw recommendations. So this is not news either. With respect to the language, I'm completely comfortable with the language, the way it's written. I have great confidence in town council and their review of the article, and have no concerns about the way the article is written. That said, nothing's perfect. I've yet to see a zoning article come to this body that was perfect. And so we may have to amend it going forward, and if so, then we will do that. But it's very important that we take steps today to curtail the onslaught of 40Bs that we're seeing here in our town, and that we address the issue of affordable housing. So it is 2 things. It's not just about taking control of 40Bs, it's also about what I think of as a moral mandate of the community to take care of people that live in our community and provide everyone the ability to live here. It is a wonderful community that we share. I think the final thing I want to say is that with respect to Sarah and some of the comments that she made earlier, I want to specifically comment that I am committed as a member of the Select Board to work with developers, to work with the ZBA to make it work. This isn't an easy thing to go and do, and it is going to take commitments all around to make it work. But if we can get it there, it's going to be to our collective benefit. And so with that, I ask the body to support this article. It's just time to get this moving, and thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Neill. Down here. Yes.
Hi, Lisa Van der Linden, RTM Precinct 8, member of Finance Committee. I stand to speak in support of this article. Walpole is growing a lot, and this article is really going to help us control that growth. The only way we can control growth in Walpole is to get to that 10% threshold of affordable housing. To reach that threshold, we need to start asking builders to meet that standard in their projects. The article has been under public discussion for years, and as Mr. Flowers has attested, there have been many experts and lawyers and consultations about it. It is definitely ready for prime time. Every time we put off this bylaw, we end up with more unregulated housing that puts us farther behind. We can make changes to this in the future, and we can make it better as we go, but we need to start before there are 2 or 3 more projects on the way. So that's the practical reason to vote yes on this, so we can control our growth. The other reason, as Jim O'Neill said very eloquently, is a moral mandate, or as Mr. Barrett said in his original message very inspirationally, affordable housing is good for Walpole. It's good if you're a senior citizen looking to downsize and you want to stay in town. It's good if you're a teacher or a public servant and you want to live where you work. It's good if you're a young person who grew up in Walpole and you're ready for a starter home and you want to be here. We are a better, healthier community if we have affordable housing available to us. We should have started 2 years ago and then we'd already be at the threshold. But we can start now, and I hope you vote yes on this amendment, this article.
Thank you, Ms. Van der Linden. Mr. O'Leary?
John O'Leary, RTM Precinct 3, and also the member of the planning board. I have to agree that the idea of affordable housing is going to be something that pretty much everyone here is in favor of. Article 19 is not the way to do it, unfortunately. The idea is for any new developments to include affordable housing units. Yet, one of the exemptions specifically allows the developers not to build any affordable housing units and merely give the town some money. How does that help us to create affordable housing units? It goes into a trust if we approve the trust, if it gets approved. And it sits there and is approved by a town-appointed board who may have little interest in it, actually. And it's not creating affordable units. The other item which came up in our planning board meeting Wednesday, the affordable housing units can be built on as small as 25% of the required lot size. Now, for instance, in rural, that means required lot size is 40,000 square feet. That would mean potentially someone wakes up the next morning and finds that their house next door has been taken down and there's now 4 smaller houses on that lot. So before you vote yes for this, remember that this density issue is written right into their bylaw. And there's nothing to prevent a developer from saying, okay, all my units are affordable housing units. I'm building lower price units, but I'm fitting them in 1/4 the size I normally could. He's still gonna make out 2 to 1 on anything he would have made by building the one house. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Leary.
Afternoon, Sean McCauley, Precinct 2. I appreciate all the arguments that everyone's been making and presenting, but I don't want to go down the rabbit hole. Right now, we're not at 10%, which means we have no voice, and that the builders and contractors can do whatever they want. So, I'm voting yes, because this is the beginning of allowing us to have a voice in what we want the future of Walpole to look like. The public sector is who's in charge, not the private contractors. We're going to dictate where the goalposts are in our town. If you vote no, you're letting people come in, private contractors and developers, and tell us what they're going to do. So that's it. There is no in between. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Mr. McCauley. Mr. Hausnier.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The housing is a market. It's a business. There are government functions for housing that are available to Walpole right now that have nothing to do with the Affordable Housing Committee. We have HUD, we have 15 programs available under HUD. We have LIP, we have the county and state programs, we have the 40B, the 40R, and we have a Walpole Housing Authority, which people seem to have forgot about. It's interesting how in Walpole we have the old police station, we have 2 police stations, we have 2 fire stations, 3 post offices. I guess we're going to have 2 housing departments now too. We like to double the money it's like the old Doublemint, double your flavor, double your fun, Doublemint chewing gum. Why, what happened to the Walpole Housing Authority? Why did they cut out of this? They're the elected body that actually would be responsible to handle funds and handle decisions, and voters would have a chance to control them through the vote. An appointed committee, they can't do that. But at any rate, my point is that unfortunately, instead of finger pointing, the local contractors and local business people are opposed to this article and have not been involved or engaged in this article, contrary to what you've been told. The Walpole Chamber of Commerce, the Realtors Association, the Economic Development Commission of Walpole, every business group in the town is opposed to this article and have not been involved in it. Some of those folks came to the planning board meeting, particularly the small business people, and expressed their concerns. They're interested more in the business district and the CBD and the opportunities, the investments they've made. None of these folks are interested in the so-called slur 40Bs. None of these people, the local people, it's a losing proposition. Some of them recently may have been forced into applying for that because of permitting failures that don't work. But in over 50 years of the 40B being available, up to 2 years ago, we only had one project in town in 50 years. There's a second one now open in Moose Hill Road, which is beautiful. And I'm not defending that. But what people object to in the CBD could have been remedied any day without any committees or any affordable housing program. You have the ability to cap and to make requirements for parking and for affordability for those applications and put a cap on how many multifamily units you would allow in your CBD. For some reason, that hasn't been done. People want to get into the business of housing and ultimately building housing, I think, on behalf of the government. The market does not accept these standards. The 6 units does not pencil. I think 4 or 5 local people that do that for a living, like Mr. Walsh, came up and said, this just doesn't work. We're not going to do it. It's upside down. Admittedly, there does need to be more participation, but the finger pointing, frankly, I really get upset. We say, oh, we've had visioning sessions. People weren't invited. No one in town other than this football field and about 50 other people know about this at all. And it affects 25,000 people in this town. This article for multifamily, if you want multifamily under this inclusionary zoning, it almost axiomatically will go to East Walpole because East Walpole has the RB and the general residence zone, the underpinning zone that it would have to go in. So you're targeting one area of town and no one knows it. This should be on a referendum ballot townwide that everybody can vote on, not a committee of 5 people or 7 people.
Mr. Hasenjager, would you like additional time? You need
please, just a minute or two. Yeah,
folks. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your cards. Go continue, Mr. Hasenjager.
Thank you. I think that the business community would like to participate in shaping something that is meaningful, and but I just want you to understand the market. If someone came for a large project in Walpole right now, it would be thrown down by the banks. I talked to the 3 local banks. None of them would fund it. Our market is overbuilt right now. These housing units that are downtown are going to be empty 2 years from now. They're going to be going Section 8. You're going to be infiltrated with affordable housing. Believe me, you have no idea what's coming. You need people to understand the investment, to understand the business, understand the opportunity as well as the risks in housing, not average citizens who self-anoint themselves as housing experts and consultants. And I think when people say that, like, holes like Swiss cheese, I'm sorry, I can't accept. I don't care who the town council is sitting down there. there's something wrong here, because every lawyer I've heard from say this is challengeable, it's not gonna work, it's gonna cause us a lot of angina. We have to move forward on this, but I think this has to be reorganized in a way that all the stakeholders are involved, the business community is on board, and we do something that's both practical and beneficial for the whole community and all the districts, not just East Walpole. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hassenjäger. Down the end there.
Kathleen Grulich, Precinct 8, and a member of the Finance Committee. Through you, Mr. Moderator, I understand we can have differences of opinion, but I think it's important that we agree on the facts. And the facts are, this has been discussed for well over a year. There are barely enough hours in the day to review all of the videos that are available on YouTube of meetings that were held to discuss this. So my opinion is, if you don't know about this at this point, you didn't want to know about it. There's plenty of information out there, and there are, in times of COVID, lots of ways to learn from your own home what this is about. The other fact that's concerning to me is when I hear people say in rural, 40,000 is the zoning, and you could just tear down a house and put 4 houses. That's not how this works. You would have to have lots for someone, through you, Mr. Moderator, you can throw this out to someone to correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is each lot would have to be about 35,000, so you'd get a little bit of a decrease in your each lot size, but the only lot that's decreased is the affordable, and then that bonus is distributed across all 6 houses. So you'd have 6 houses on 35,000 feet each. Is that correct? Can somebody?
Mr. Flowers is giving you the thumbs up.
He's giving me the
on
thumbs
that.
up. So nobody's tearing down a house on a 40,000 and putting up 4 houses with 10,000 square feet each. That's not how it works.
Mr. Conroy, would you like to comment on that as well? Sorry, Mr. Conroy is I wanted to have him comment on that as well.
The intent is what you said, the 1 and 6, but in actuality, if you read the bylaw, you can just come in and make as many as you want, because you have to have one affordable for every 6. But if you want to do all affordable, have at it. Make as many as you want on the lot, up to 25%.
Thank you, Mr. Conroy.
I think that was clarified in the planning board that the affordable is the only thing that gets the bonus.
Mr. Conroy?
Yeah, the affordable gets a bonus if you want to do 1 and 6, but if I wanted to walk in tomorrow and say, I want to do 6 here, affordable, then you can do that. This is to say if you want to build like a subdivision, like up in North Walpole, 50 lots, and you'd have to have, I don't know, 4 or 5 affordables. But if you want to walk in and say, I want this lot right here, and I'm going to put 4 affordables up on that lot, you can do that based upon the reduction allowed in the bylaw.
All right, I'm going to do something unusual here. Mr. Flowers, but no more of the back and forth, point, counterpoint. If you could kind of make your comments, Ms. Grulich. I want to help everybody here, but I'm worried this is going to keep going back and forth and become an argument here.
So just to
Thank
be
you, Jack.
clear, the inclusionary zoning bylaw is by special permit through the Zoning Board of Appeals. We have some ZBA members here. The ZBA has to approve these dimensional waivers, these reductions in the minimum lot size requirements. So this notion that you can buy a lot and quadruple the size and cram 4 affordable units and do all affordable only applies if the ZBA allows you to. And so the whole point of Mr. Barrett on the select board, Mr. Jim O'Neill, Mr. Mark Gallivan, Sarah Khatib, people have gone up here over and over and said, the point is that the select board wants to work collaboratively with the ZBA to guide them. The ZBA is not gonna just greenlight quadrupling the town's density. That is a hyperbolic argument.
Thank you, Mr. Flowers. Ms. Grulich, continue.
The only other point that a factual thing is the 7,000 new units use of water. This is not going to result in 7,000 new units that weren't coming to Walpole otherwise. That's not, I mean, we've been saying all along that this probably won't get us to the 10%. It's very incremental. So I rise in favor of this.
Thank you, Ms. Grulich. Ms. Mulligan.
Hi, Joanne Mulligan, Precinct 5, RTM. I have been following this for quite a while. I've gone to probably every meeting on it. I don't think that people weren't invited, and I think everybody should know all about it. I do feel like we only heard from the builders or the attorneys for the builders at planning board. It was very disheartening. It was the whole thing was very upsetting to me. I go back and forth. I live in South Walpole. We're fighting the Omni development, which should not have happened if all of this was passed years ago, but we're not going to talk about the past. So I agree with Sean McCauley, Kathleen, and the people who have come up here to say, now's the time to do it. It is the time. We can't wait. We sit and wait on too many different things. The state has all the control. We have no local control. If we want to get local control, we have to pass this. It's just, this is a really difficult thing. I've gone back and forth. I know many RTMs have, but I hope that everyone comes together and does work collaboratively with the builders, with legal counsel, with zoning, with planning. Let's see it. I'd love to see some collaboration. And one other thing, Mr. Moderator, I've said this a long time ago, but I think zoning and planning is really tough to understand for the regular person. And I'd be the first to sign up if someone wants to do a primer on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Mulligan. The town administrator is going to just correct a point or add a clarification. Mr.
Sure,
Johnson?
just to clarify here, I was able to confirm there's about 9,000 and 9,500 current units, depending on how you count the downtown apartment units factored in there. So that 7,000 number, I just wanted to give you all some perspective. We're at about 9,000 to 9,500 right now.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Ms. Lawson?
Susan Lawson, Precinct 2, member of Finance Committee. I just want to say that I've been following this for well over a year, and it has been obvious to me that everyone in town has been invited to be involved in this issue and to attend the many, many meetings that have been held. I've attended a number of them, but there's been no attempt to do this in a silent or sub rosa fashion. If you haven't been involved, it's because it just hasn't been on your radar or not of interest to you. Number two, I think we should all make note of the fact that a lot of the opposition is coming from developers and business people. I want you to think about that. I want you to follow the money, consider whether there's some self-interest involved in that opposition. The other thing I want to note here is that I've listened to a lot of scare tactics being used today. I think when people use scare tactics, for me it's a red flag. If there are problems with this article as we go forward, we can fix it, we can repair it, we can come back, make improvements, but the idea that we do nothing because people are coming up here with boogeymen to scare us is disturbing to me. As Sean McCauley said earlier, and I liked the way he said it, we need to take charge of our own destiny. We need to do that. We need to stop complaining about 40Bs. We need to take control of our own future. And we need to do it now. I stand in support of this article. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lawson. Ms. Coletti?
Hello. Linda Coletti, RTM, Precinct 4. My concern is this: if this passes, will Walpole residents, especially senior citizens who are low income type of people, will they be able to have preference, first preference to one of these 40B housing units? And each and every one after that that's made, will they always have first choice?
Mr. Barrett?
Through you, Mr. Moderator, and Mr. Flowers can correct me, but I believe it's is it 70%? There's a marker there. So the short answer to that question is yes. Walpole residents will be able to have choice in that up to a point. It can't be, we can't say it's only Walpole residents. That would be illegal.
That's
But
true.
we can give them preference up to a point.
Okay,
And that's what's in there now.
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Coletti. Ms. Khatib, your patience has paid off.
Thank you. I know I already spoke. Thank you. Sarah Khatib, Precinct 8, Planning Board. I just wanted to make a couple quick points. It's mentioned that this bylaw takes the planning board out of it, and it puts the ZBA in control of the special permit regarding the affordable housing. But if there's a project, let's say subdivision, the planning board is still gonna handle that. So it's something that's done often. A particular project will go through multiple boards at the same time. So the planning board is still there doing subdivision or site plan or whatever the case may be. But the ZBA would be the board in control of the special permit. And just wanted to echo that the ZBA has the discretion in this bylaw to, to approve and to not approve reasonable and unreasonable requests, as Mr. Flowers had mentioned. And then just going off what Mr. Johnson said, so our total housing stock is around like 9 or 10,000. So we shoot for 10%, that's like 900, 1,000. There's no like thousands of affordable units that are coming on board, right? So we're currently somewhere in the 600, so we need a few hundred to get to our 10%. It's not thousands. And then I just wanted to summarize all the words that I said before for those of you that fell asleep. So my issue with why I voted the way I did at Planning Board was the non-rental units and those penciling in with what's there in the bylaw. And the reason that I'm convinced that we can do it is because if we have commitment from the town to be collaborative and to work and to not, just say no, like if we all as a town agree that we need to add to our affordable housing and we're going to work towards that, then I think it can work. If we just, take this bylaw, we put it on the ZBA's desk and walk away, I think it's not. But if we have the commitment from the town to work and add the units, I think it can work, and I urge you to please vote in favor.
Thank you, Ms. Khatib.
Thank you.
Ms. Pedersen.
Deb Pedersen, Precinct 2. I'd like to move the question.
I heard a second. Thank you, Mr. Nizio. The question has been moved. All those in favor, please say aye. And raise your green cards. Thank you. All those opposed, please say no and raise your red card. The question has been moved. It is a vote. All right, so now we will vote on a favorable action for Article 19. This motion requires a 2/3 vote. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your green card. Thank you. All those opposed, please say no and raise your red card. Folks, there's been a lot of debate on this, very good debate, very respectful debate, and just to be absolutely certain, I'm going to go to a standing count. Tellers, please rise. Okay, tellers, favorable, please raise your hand, please, and your card. 2, 3, 4. Okay. I got 4. No, just the tellers right now, please. Just the tellers. Thank you. I got 4. 4 tellers. Thank you. Tellers voting no, please raise your red card. And I've got 2. Okay. All right. In your section, please, if you're voting in favor, please rise and raise your green card and stand next to your chair. Do not move around. Help the tellers make the count. Yeah, thank you. Center, please count the folks up front too, please. Thank you, Mr. Trudell. Checking right now. Tellers, when you're all set, please go to the microphone, one of you, please, once you've concurred. Mr. Lee, for the center vote?
In the center, 30.
30 yes. Ms. Gallivan on the left?
We have 3 yes.
Thank you, Ms. Gallivan. Ms. Lawson on the right?
32.
Thank you, Ms. Lawson. Please be seated. All those opposed, please rise, stand next to your seat, and hold up your red card. Oh, I think I forgot the 3. The center section can be seated. And the left. And now the right. Ms. Gallivan, the left.
We have 14 noes.
Thank you, Ms. Gallivan. Mr. Lee in the center.
In the center, 19.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. And Ms. Lawson on the right.
14.
Thank you, Ms. Lawson. That gives us 69 yes, 49 no out of 118 voters. The motion fails. That is not 2/3. It is a vote. Article 20. This is for the Walpole Housing Trust. It is regularly moved and seconded that the town vote to amend the Walpole general bylaws as set forth in the warrant under Article 20. Again, this is an extensive motion and article, so I'm not going to read any further. Mr. Trudell, this is a petition of the Select Board. Mr. Trudell, the Finance Committee vote.
Finance Committee voted favorable action 12-1-1.
Thank you, Mr. Trudell. Mr. Barrett, the Select Board vote.
The Select Board voted favorable action 4-1-0.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Any questions or comments with regard to Article 20? There being none, this requires a simple majority vote. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your green card. All those opposed, please say no and raise your red card. The noes have it. It is a vote. Yeah, that's the motion is defeated. Article 21, the stretch building code. Yes. Oh, okay, January, thank you. The stretch building code, it is regularly moved and seconded that the town vote to amend the general bylaws by enacting a new bylaw entitled Stretch Energy Code for the purpose of regulating the design and construction of buildings for the effective use of energy pursuant to Appendix 115.AA of the Massachusetts Building Code 780 CMR, the Stretch Energy Code, including future additions, amendments, or modifications thereto, with an effective date of January 1, 2021, as on file with the town clerk. This is a petition of the Select Board. Mr. Trudell, the Finance Committee vote.
Finance Committee voted favorable action 12-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Trudell. Mr. Barrett, Select Board vote.
The Select Board voted favorable action 5-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Any questions or comments with regard to Article 1? Excuse me, Article 21. Mr. Hassenjager.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Just an FYI, the stretch building code is great for people who want energy conservation and want to be energy economical, but is also expensive. We just talked about affordable housing here. When you build affordable housing, this adds $12,000 to $15,000 to the home cost. It's an arbitrary thing. When Walpole builds buildings and anybody else can opt to do the stretch building code, no problem. And they can actually participate in energy rebates and other opportunities. But to force this on everyone, it goes contrary to some of the sentiment and philosophy you heard there this afternoon about trying to make things more affordable. And if you want to have the affordable option for people in housing, you would not mandate this. You would leave it as an option so they can have it if they want it, and if not, if not. Now, the state causes towns to get into this by saying if the whole town is a green community, you may be able to get a semi-matching grant for XYZ for a municipal purpose, but it doesn't help the affordable homeowner. The other part about the stretch building code, just again, for your information, these codes are so tight, they cause mold. In new homes, people have to have a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week, 24-hour exhaust fan exchanging air to the home because you would die. It actually builds a house like a coffin. So it sounds good, it's a technical thing, but it's, I don't think it should be mandated. I think it's free, it's America. There should be some freedom and choice. If people don't want to be over-insulated, don't want to have mold in their home, and don't want to spend 10, 15 grand more, they should have that option not to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hassenjager. Mr. Czekarovsky.
Philip Shaharovsky, Precinct 7, also a member of the Planning Board. I rise to speak in favor of this article, and there's two good reasons for us to vote for it. First, it's good for the homeowners, and it's good for the builders. It's good for the homeowners because the houses will be more energy efficient, saving money on an ongoing basis during the life of ownership. So the Massachusetts Department of Energy Resources has 8 models on their website that show that the time to the payback for investing and making the house energy efficient is only 1 to 2 years. And the reason for that is that there's so many rebates from Mass Save. People want houses that are energy efficient because of the savings for their ownership. Second, it's right now 284 out of 351 towns have already accepted the stretch code. So we're not doing anything that isn't already happening around the towns around us. Builders are already building houses like this. The question about whether it's going to be have mold or health issues is spurious. There's many ways to address that, and many people already living in houses like this. So it's not really an issue. The other main reason to support this is because it's true. We can become a green community, and it's good for society. Massachusetts has the Global Solutions Warming Act, has targets for the state to get to a certain level of energy efficiency. If we ever have any hope of getting there, we need to do all of these incremental things like making our houses more energy efficient. So this is one of the criteria for Walpole becoming a green community, and I want to commend the Select Board for voting to apply to become a green community. So again, 284 out of 351 houses have already accepted the stretch building code. It's not going to add a lot of cost. And for one big change, by the way, is that it's not so much of a stretch as it was when this first came up 10 or 12 years ago. When that came up, the stretch code was prescriptive in the sense that it didn't give developers much of a leeway on how they achieved energy efficiency. Now it's performance-based, so that it just sets out what the goal is, but developers have total leeway on how they want to build the house to get to that level of efficiency. So again, I please urge you to vote for this. It's a very small thing, and we're only going to be doing like most of our neighboring towns. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Czekarovsky. Mr. Hamilton.
Hamilton Precinct 5. If a homeowner has a tragedy like a tree falling on the house or a fire, and they have to rebuild, will this apply to their rebuilding?
Jim, you got who? Mr. Yanovich, thank you.
Mr. Moderator, through you, Mike Yanovich, Building Commissioner, it will not apply to a rebuild after a catastrophe if there's a minor repair. If there's a complete rebuild of a house from the ground up, yes, it will apply to that new structure.
Well, I speak against this. Why do I have to spend money? I should be grandfathered. If I lost my home to a fire or a tree that fell on it and what had to be there, I'd have to pay to remove what was damaged, and then I gotta pay an expense for a stretch code. I think that's a bad idea, and I speak against it.
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. Any further questions? Mr. Barrett.
Mr. Moderator, through you, I just wanted to reiterate a point that Mr. Chekarowski had made, which is when we looked at this at the select board, because Mr. Chekarowski had alluded to a bigger plan as far as the green communities and some of the things the town's looking at for money-saving opportunities, not just for the town, but also for residents. It's well-established program, the stretch code, that it saves homeowners money. When people are looking for homes these days, they want homes that adhere to this because it saves you money. So there may be scenarios in which you could work how it if you have to rebuild your house and how much money it's going to cost is how much you save. But when people build new houses, they build to the stretch code because it saves money. And the other thing I would add to that is, we did talk to developers about this, and the developers that I asked about the stretch code, they just chuckled because they've been doing this for a long time. Because again, as Mrs. Chekarowski said, there are hundreds of towns in Massachusetts that do this. In fact, Walpole is one of the only ones that don't. And frankly, it's a little embarrassing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Mr. Ardeen?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Through you, would this include renovations? I know rebuild, but what's the difference if someone's renovating? Would it include renovations?
Mr. Yanovich?
Again, Mr. Moderator, through you, it would not include renovations unless you were to renovate a house and there were no insulation in the walls. And at that point, what the code says that you would just fill the cavity, you would fill the insulated element of the building with the most that you could get into the wall. So it does not apply to renovations, but it would apply to additions to an existing house.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Mr. Ardeen.
Mr. Moderator, Bernie Gober, Precinct 5. As an architect, I'm wondering why we're here, as some of the expressions that were made about the cost of doing what's being prescribed. Because right now you have to put 36 R factor in your attics, you have to put 19 in your walls, you have to insulate your foundations, and everything has to be sealed tight. So what's being proposed isn't much different than what already exists. The story about it costing $15,000 to do a house is a myth. It doesn't exist because you already have to insulate it to a certain code. And this is just going an inch further at no great expense. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goba. Any further questions or comments with respect to Article 21? There being none, this requires a simple majority vote. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your green card. All those opposed, please say no and raise your red card. It is a vote, and it's favorable. The motion passes. Article 22 is in the consent agenda. We are on Article 23, a zoning bylaw amendment for outdoor dining. It is regularly moved and seconded that the town vote to amend the zoning bylaw to allow outdoor dining and outdoor entertainment by right in the business, central business district, highway business district, and limited manufacturing business district by amending section 5-B1 use table subsections 4Q(I) and 4Q1 and 4Q4 as printed in the warrant. This is a petition of the Select Board. Mr. Trudell, the Finance Committee vote.
Finance Committee voted favorable action, 14-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Trudell. Mr. Barrett, Select Board vote.
The select board voted favorable action 5-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Mr. Conroy, the Planning Board.
The planning board voted 4-0-1, favorable action.
Thank you, Mr. Conroy. Any questions or comments with regard to Article 23? Mr. Lee.
Good afternoon, John Lee, Precinct 6, also a member of the Zoning Board. Although I'm more than happy to give up any extra work for the Zoning Board, I want the residents to be aware that if this passes, we could find a situation where in the business districts of town, and there are people that live right around there, we could have a situation where businesses would be allowed as of right to just expand to outdoor dining, stuff that we've seen recently with the COVID epidemic. So I think it's really, I want people to be aware of what that means. That would mean that this expansion would be allowed as of right, there'd be no public hearing, and right now, all it means is that the property owner would just go to the zoning board, and if they meet the safety requirements and it can be done that's acceptable to the community, they would usually get approval. I don't see why they would not get approval. If this is passed, we're going to lose protection because would become an as of right. I just want people to be aware of that. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Mr. Forsberg.
Mr. Moderator, Forsberg, Precinct 7. I just want to make a point that with this outdoor dining, there's a possibility that you would be increasing your capacity of an establishment. And as a plumbing inspector in another town, we have this issue a lot that your fixture count does not match your capacity. So I just want to make sure that the local plumbing inspector is aware of this and to make sure that you have the proper count. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Forsberg. Any further questions or yes, Mr. Moraski.
Mr. Moderator. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Moraski, Precinct 8. I'd like to go back to Mr. Lee's statement and ask whether this also pertains to outdoor entertainment as well. Would neighbors be given notice about potential outdoor entertainment?
Thank you, Mr. Lee.
Mr. Moderator, if you look at the table, it says right on here, regular furnishing of live entertainment, and that would be a approval, that's an as of right if this passes. And again, I just think people should be aware that the zoning board would take a look at these cases. If there was neighbor opposition, there'd be discussion about that. But right now, neighbors would no longer have a chance to have any input on this.
And the reason I ask is because Ashley Clark's memo to town meeting just pertains to outdoor dining. I don't have a problem with outdoor dining, but I do have a problem with neighbors not getting notice for outdoor entertainment, especially in the CBD where a lot of residential areas surround the central business district. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moraski. Sir.
Hi, John Mostich, Precinct 6. It's actually related to that. Should there be, what's the process if there are complaints by the neighborhood about loud music or trouble in the area? What's the process at that point that they go through? Like, who do they complain to, and then who makes the decision on whether they restrict that license at all?
Ms. Clark, can you speak to this? Who's closer? Mike or Mr. Yanovich, or either one of you, that's fine.
Mr. Moderator, through you, if I could just clarify some of the questions that were raised. There's still a licensing requirement for this use. So there's not that it's as of right. As of right is just not straight as of right. There is a requirement that all the departments in town hall that have a stake in permitting, police, fire, building, board of health, engineering, will actually hold a meeting and make recommendations, and then turn that recommendation into the Board of Selectmen, who in turn will either issue the license or they will not issue the license. If we look in our neighboring town of Norwood, where I think Mr. Forsberg is the plumbing inspector, it's currently as of right there as well. So there is still protections for the neighbors. The building department, the fire department, and the police department, as well as health, are out all the time now without having live entertainment and outdoor seating, answering complaints and making sure that business owners are aware of what they can and can't do. We've had the ability here with COVID to vet this process out. We've had this process ongoing for the current outdoor seating and some entertainment for that matter that's going on in downtown right now. Right now, this is as of right in the Highway Business District. We have a great downtown. And we want to help these business owners who for the next, I don't know how many years, are going to be railing to get back on their feet. This is one method to do that, rather than requiring them to go through a month-long process to obtain a license for entertainment and outdoor seating. One could argue that the special permit process gives somebody more rights, because the special permit will run with the land and not necessarily with the owner or with that business if there isn't a personal condition placed on that particular grant. So the special permit actually gives somebody more authority. The licensing authority has the ability to revoke to revoke a license if somebody is in violation of that license.
Can I ask one more question?
You certainly may.
The other day at one of the town meetings, they said that there was some issues with how it was written. I'm actually in support of this, but I also want to make sure that we don't put it forward and then have it come back to us and say we can't do this for 2 years.
Town council?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The motion that you read addresses exactly where it should go. Although we believe it was clear when you look at it what section it goes in, now it specifically says so as well.
Thank you, Mr. Mustard. Ms. Mulligan?
Hi, Joanne Mulligan, Precinct 5. I think Mike just answered my question. I was going to say that I believe that a license by the select board would be necessary, and it always could be revoked. And I stand in 1,000% support of the downtown businesses, and I will tell you, on this article, I got lots of comments and emails, phone calls, like this is a no-brainer. I understand the logistics of, if we have more people and they need to worry about the plumbing, but let's get behind this one.
Thank you, Ms. Mulligan. Mr. Barrett?
Through you, Mr. Moderator, I just wanted to add on to what Mr. Yanovich had said in our discussions. This is the perfect example of town hall and the town and the select board identifying an issue, coordinating with the businesses, reasonable person-to-person discussions, and then moving forward on an issue. So the more we can do things and show the town meeting is behind it, it gives the select board the ability to then go to businesses and say, hey, let's talk about other items that could help you downtown, particularly in this time with the pandemic. So we want to do more work together like this and be able to coordinate with downtown businesses and have town meeting be behind it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Any further questions or comments? There being none, this motion requires a 2/3 vote. All those in favor, say aye and raise your green card. Thank you. All those opposed, please say no and raise your red card. I declare a 2/3 vote. Motion passes. Okay, Article 24 was in the consent agenda. Article 25 was in the consent agenda. We have a substitute motion for Article 26. Sorry, I just gotta find my substitute motion. I gave it to you, didn't I? I just need to remember who it was. So, motion from Joanne Mulligan Precinct 5, seconded by Erica Burden. Precinct 5 also. This is the petitioner has asked this motion to be referred back to the petitioner. Any questions and comments on the substitute motion? By the way, I apologize, folks. This is the citizens petition to change the zoning bylaws to allow parking in South Walpole. Since we have a substitute to refer back, I'll stop there. Any questions or comments? All those in, actually, it just requires a simple majority. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your green card. Opposed, and raise your red card. It is a unanimous vote. The substitute motion carries. This is referred back to the petitioner. Sir. Mr. O'Leary, instead of yelling, would you please come down to the microphone? Thank you.
John O'Leary, TM3. Don't we need to first accept the substitute motion and then vote on it?
We just voted on it.
No, but don't we need to accept it in place of the original motion first?
No.
Why not? We always have to vote for a substitute motion, to accept a substitute motion rather than the main motion.
Mr. O'Leary, the substitute motion now becomes the main motion and it is passed.
Doesn't that require 2 votes? I'm not opposed to it.
No, it does not. It does, Town Council, it does not require a second vote, correct? It does not require a second vote, Mr. O'Leary. Thank you for your question and your concern. Mr. Buckley.
Through you, Mr. Moderator, are we done with Article 26 now?
We are done with Article 26.
Motion to dissolve.
I have a motion to dissolve and a second by Mr. Lombardi. This motion is not debatable. So all those in favor, please raise your green card and say aye. All those opposed, please say no and raise your red card. The motion carries. The meeting is dissolved, and we'll see you in the spring. Thank you, folks.